Who invented politics? The answer will make you angry. Politics was never meant to exist. Here's the proof. The first politician in human history was a liar. How a handful of cavemen built the system that controls you today. Right now, somewhere in the world, a politician is lying to your face. And here's the part that will genuinely disturb you. He is not doing anything new. He is doing something that started 3 lakh years ago, before language had grammar, before anyone had a name for government, before anyone even knew what a vote was. Politics wasn't invented in Athens. It wasn't invented in Rome. It wasn't written into being by some genius philosopher with a scroll and a plan. Politics was born to exact moment the second human being on earth looked at the first one and thought, I want what you have and I am going to figure out how to take it without a fight. That is it. That is the whole thing. Everything else, kings, parliament, election, revolution, is just a decoration on top of that on instinct. By the end of the video, you will know exactly who invented politics, how it evolved for separate times across human history, and why the system you live under today is structurally almost identical to a 10,000-year-old tribal negotiation. Let's go back to the beginning. Before we get to humans, we need 15 seconds on chimpanzees. I promise this is relevant. Primatologist Jan Goodall spent decades watching chimp troops in Tanzania, and what she found looked less like nature documentary footage and more like a mafia film. Alpha males did not just win fights, they built coalition. A weaker chimp could become the most powerful chimp in the troop, not through strength, but through alliance, grooming the right allies, isolating rivals, trading favors. That is not survival instinct. That is the strategy. That's politics without language. So when early humans show up 3 lakh years ago, they don't invent this behavior. They inherit it. And then they do something no chimp ever could. They add dog. Anthropologists studying remaining hunter-gatherer society, the Hadza of Tanzania, the Kung of the Kalahari, found something surprising. These societies are almost aggressively anti-hierarchy. If a hunter starts bragging about a big kill or tries to booze other around, the rest of group does not fight him. They mock him publicly, relentlessly. Anthropologist Christopher Boheme called this reverse dominance hierarchy. The group actively, collectively work to keep any one person from becoming too powerful, which means the very first political system in human history was not a monarchy. It wasn't a democracy either. It was something almost forgotten today. Politics, at its origin, wasn't about gaining power. It was about preventing any one person from getting it. Remember that. It's going to matter a lot by the end of this video, because everything that comes next is the slow, 4-stage collapse of that original idea. So, how did we get from? Everyone mocks the guy who thinks he is special, the actual kings. Around 10,000 BCE, agriculture happens. And agriculture changed everything, because for the first time in human history, there is a surplus, extra gain, extra food, something that can be stored, hoarded, and critically controlled. The moment there is surplus to control, the old trick of mock anyone who acts superior stops working, because now there is something worth the risk of being mocked for. Here is where it gets interesting. The earliest large civilization, Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, didn't just let the strong person grab the surplus. They needed something more durable than muscle. They needed belief. So they invented a story: the person is not strong because he fought for it. He is strong because the gods chose him. The pharaoh wasn't just a ruler in ancient Egypt. He was thought to be a god in human form, wielding complete religious, political, economic, judicial, military, and social control. This wasn't a spin. Egyptians genuinely believed the pharaoh's word could hold back chaos itself, a concept called mat, meaning divine order and truth. Think about how efficient that lie was. You did not need any army standing behind every single decision. You just needed people to believe that questioning the king meant questioning the universe itself. This is the birth of what we now call the state, and it runs on a completely different fuel than the tribal council. The tribal council ran for shame, the state runs from myth. And here is the twist: the historians rarely say out loud in plain language the first politicians in this era weren't kings. They were the priests, the one who controlled the story about why the king deserved power. The people who wrote the myth held more real leverage than the person the myth was about. That pattern, the person with the microphone matters more than the person with the crown, is still exactly how modern politics works. We just call the priest something else now: strategists, spin doctors, media. Fast forward to 508 BCE. A city-state called Athens is a mess. It is being ruled by a series of tyrants, and one aristocrat, Cleanthes, is about to do something no one's ever tried. He is not a philosopher. He is not an idealist. He is a loser. He had just lot of power struggle to a rival family and, in a desperate move to win back support, he did something radical. He handed political power directly to the ordinary citizens of Athens. He wasn't trying to build democracy for democracy's sake. He was trying to win. This is the part they don't put in the textbooks. Democracy's origin story is a political power play, not a moral awakening. But once the mechanism exists, it took on a life of its own. Athens' democracy created the ecclesia, an assembly where any male citizen could speak, propose laws, and vote directly. No representative, no filter, just you standing on a hill arguing in front of thousands of your neighbors. And it had a brutal safety valve most people have never heard about: ostracism. Once a year, Athenians could vote by scratching a name into a piece of broken pottery. The exile any citizen they felt was accumulating too much power. 10 years gone, no trial, no crime required, just the fear of the crowd. Sound familiar? That's the tribal. Mock the guy who acts superior. Instinct from chapter 1, except now it's been formalized into an actual legal mechanism. Thousands of years later, in a city of 3 lakh people, Athens didn't invent politics. Athens industrialized an instinct that was already 2,90,000 years old. But, and this is the twist nobody tells you, Athenian democracy exclude women, enslaved people, and anyone not born to Athenian parents. Historians estimate only somewhere around 10 to 20% of the population could actually vote. The birthplace of democracy was, by modern standard, an exclusive club pretending to be the whole city. That contradiction, a system that calls itself the people rule while deciding who counts as the people, is the single most repeated pattern in the next 2,500 years of political history. Watch for it. It shows up again in 3 more chapters. Jump forward almost 2000 years, Florence, early 1500s, a minor diplomat named Niccolo Machiavelli has just been fired, tortured and suspicion of conspiracy, and exiled to a small farm outside the city. And out of the pure desperation to get back into political relevance, he writes a short manual for prince on how to seize and hold power. He calls it simply The Prince. Who makes the book explosive? Isn't that its original? Every idea in it had already been practiced by rulers for centuries. What makes it explosive is that Machiavelli wrote it down plainly, stripped of the moral packaging everyone else used to dress up the same behavior. When earlier writers said ruler must be virtuous, Machiavelli essentially argued that it is more useful for a ruler appear virtuous than actually be virtuous. Because appearance is what the public reacts to, and reality is what the ruler privately controls. It is better in his farming to be feared than loved. If you cannot be both, because love depends on other people's goodwill and fear depends entirely on you. This was scandalous not because it introduced new tactics, but because it removed the last polite lie. The idea that political power and moral goodness were the same thing. Machiavelli split them apart on paper for the first time in European political writing, and the word Machiavellian he meant ruthlessly strategic ever since. Here is the connection back to chapter 2, and might not expect Machiavelli is doing the exact opposite what the Egyptian priesthood did. The priest wrapped raw power in scared myth. Machiavelli tore the myth off and showed the raw mechanism underneath. Both approaches, though, the myth makers and the myth breakers agree on one dark, shared assumptions. The public cannot be trusted with the truth about how power actually works. One side hides it behind religion, the other hides it behind cynicism disguised as just being honest. Either way, ordinary people are kept one step removed from the real machinery. Now here is where politics stop being just a set of tactics and becomes a full theory, an actual attempt to answer the question why should anyone obey a government at all? Their mean, roughly a century apart, gave three widely different answers. Thomas Hobbes, writing in 1651, writing after England's brutal civil war, believed human life without government was, in his own famous phrase, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. His solution was almost frighteningly simple. People should hand over nearly all their freedom to an all-powerful ruler, a leviathan, in exchange for basic safety. Any government, even a harsh one, beats no government at all. John Locke, writing about 40 years later, pushed back hard. Locke argued people have natural right, a life, liberty and property that exist before and government, and that government only earns legitimacy by protecting those rights. The moment it stops protecting them, citizens have the right to remove it. This idea would later show up, the almost word for word, in the American Declaration of Independence. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, writing in 1762, went further still. He argued truth, political legitimacy comes from the general will of the people. The government isn't valid because a king was born into it or because it protects property, but because the people collectively consent to it. Here is the twist. These three men arguing across a century were really just formalizing arguments that were already happens on the ground. Between kings and parliament, between colonists and crowns, between peasant and landlords who had been fighting for exactly these questions for centuries without ever writing them down as philosophy. The philosopher did not invent these ideas. They gave the street level power struggle a vocabulary. And vocabulary is dangerous because once an idea has a name, it can spread. Natural rights, social contract, the consent of the governed. These three phrases alone would go on to fuel the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and eventually most of the world's constitution, which means unbelievably the single biggest force multiplier in political history wasn't weapon. It was a sentence people could quote. So let's zoom all the way back out. Stage 1, a tribe of equal using public shame to stop anyone from getting too powerful. Stage 2, a divine king using myth to make a power unquestionable. Stage 3, a city assembly using votes and exile to formalize that same old shame mechanism into law. Stage 4, a cynical manual that stripped away the myth and admitted power is just strategy. Stage 5, a set of philosophers who gave the whole argument a shared vocabulary that could spread across the world. Now look at your own country's political system. An election is a stage 3 voting mechanism, a campaign speech about family's value, or the will of the people is a stage 2 myth making minus the gods. A political strategist quietly telling a candidate what to say versus what to actually believe is a stage 4 playbook running in the background of literally even election on earth and the entire legal framework underneath it. Rights, consent, constitution is a stage 5 vocabulary copy pasted into practically every government founded in the last 250 years. Nothing was ever replaced. It just got stacked. Modern politics is not new invention. It is 3 lakh years old instinct wearing 5 different costumes at once. And that's the answer to the question in the title, who invented politics? Nobody did. Everybody keeps reinventing the same 5 moves generation after generation because the moves work. Here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Remember chapter 1, the original hunter-gatherer bands mocking anyone who tried to act superior, actively preventing power from concentrating in one person's hand. That system worked for 290,000 years. It kept humans roughly equal. It only broke the moment there was something worth hoarding. Which means the real story of politics is not king versus democracy or Machiavelli versus philosopher. The real story is a single unbroken thread. Human built an incredibly effective system to stop one person from having too much power and then spent the next 10,000 years slowly, cleverly dismantling it piece by piece every time something valuable enough appeared to be worth the risk. Every political system since Athens' Rome monarchy's democracy isn't a step forward from that original tribal council. It is a negotiation about how much of that original equality we are willing to give back in exchange for what. So next time you watch an election or a debate or a policy fight, ask yourself the only question that has actually mattered since 3 lakh BCE. Who is trying to take something from the group? And what story are they telling you so you don't notice? If this video changed how you see the news, subscribe because next week we are covering the political trick that's even older than kings. Propaganda and the first man in history who figured out how to make an entire empire believe a lie.